homeopathy is so broad that just about anything you learn can be applied to your practice. If you learn Latin, it helps. If you learn German, it helps. If you study psychology, it helps. Of course, us homeopaths should be students of human nature, and that's the most important part, where you learn about people and what they're like, and you learn how to relate to them. Yeah, so another piece of advice is I like to tell people not to follow or believe in the gurus in homeopathy. There are some individuals out there who may fashion themselves as gurus, and those individuals tend to be more dogmatic than maybe some other teachers. And what you don't want to do in homeopathy is become dogmatic. You want to have an open mind to all kinds of perspectives and not just follow the teachings of one individual. I once got a card from Australia telling me that there was a group there of farmers, and they said they get together to watch my videos, and they were thanking me, and that was really nice.
So, welcome all to yet another episode of Homeo Mitra Vartalap. And we have a very special guest with us today, all the way from the United States of America, from New York. Welcome, Dr. Larry Malerba. And I've been seeing and hearing a lot from you on the internet, especially from your educational videos. And that is how, I happened to ask him that, if he would be kind enough to grace our podcast, with his presence. And rather than me introducing him, I mean, his introduction is, his work and, his uh, achievements are really vast, right from practicing homeopathy to writing books to creating educational videos, not just for laymen, but also for fellow homeopaths. So there's a lot that Dr. Larry has done. So, Dr. Larry, welcome to our episode.
Hi, Kier. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.
So, my curiosity, as always, and the first question I asked my fellow homeopaths is that what is that brought you to homeopathy?
Oh, what brought me to homeopathy? Well, I've always been a bit of a rebellious spirit. I grew up in a very conventional family, and oftentimes my parents I would hear them say, "Oh, he's the best doctor for this. Oh, he's the best that does this." And I always thought to myself, how can they all be the best that they do? So anyway, I was always skeptical, and I was rebellious, and my parents wanted me to be either a lawyer or a doctor. My father was a lawyer, my uncles were lawyers, my sister was a lawyer. So in the end, I said, I don't want to be either, and I went off looking for something different. But eventually, I succumbed to the pressure, to the family pressure, and I decided to go to medical school. And I had the intention of becoming a psychiatrist. But the summer before I started school, I read a book called Planet Medicine. And in that book by Richard Grossinger, he had a chapter about homeopathy. And it was a very interesting description. And it's the first time I'd ever heard about homeopathy. So I read the book and I went off to medical school. And then within a week of being at medical school, I looked up at the monitor that tells you the daily schedule for all the various events, and it said that there was a noontime lecture about homeopathy. So I was really interested, and couldn't believe that's the second time I'd ever seen that word. So I attended this lecture, and there was a family practice professor who taught at the school and also practiced at the university clinic, and he was talking about homeopathy. So I became interested, and I came to the weekly lectures, and I became his shadow practically. And I went to his office to watch him practice. And the very first time I came into his office and I expressed my interest in homeopathy, he said, well, you should probably purchase some books. And he had a whole stack of books right there on top of his cabinet. So I bought a copy of Borchi's Materia Medica and Kent's Repertory. And he had a spiral bound version of Vitulcus's Stolen Essences. And he had remedy kits too. So I bought all three of those books plus a remedy kit. And I went home and I began to study. And there I was studying homeopathy right alongside my conventional medical education, which is extremely unusual in the United States. I don't never heard of any such opportunity like that. And then I, after my first year of school, I had a summer off. So instead of taking off, I spent the entire summer in Dr. Hotchner's clinic. And his clinic was really unique because when you walked in, the receptionist would say to you, well, are you looking for conventional treatment or do you want homeopathic treatment? And so I would follow around patients getting different kinds of care and almost was able to compare the two forms of medicine side by side. And I was absolutely fascinated by the results I was seeing. And so at one day, after I spent a lot of time with Dr. Hoshner, just sitting in his office listening, he turned to me one day and he said, here, you take the next case. And without warning, I said, okay, I'll do the best I can. So I took the case with him and sitting there next to me. And then when it was over, we discussed ideas and came up with a remedy choice. And that's how I began my homeopathic journey.
Well, that's quite interesting and a unique one at that, because while you were learning modern medicine, you were parallelly learning homeopathy, which is not even in India. If you ask me, it's very common, unless someone is a second or third generation allopathic doctor who has been practicing homeopathy, then probably such exposure to homeopathy is warranted. But yeah, this is quite unique, I must say.
Yeah, and then I happened to be, just married that summer before entering med school. And when we got to the town where we had our new apartment together, my wife and I, we went looking for uh, things to put in our apartment from at yard sales. And I couldn't believe it when I came across a diploma of a guy named Dr. Huntoon. It was a medical diploma from 1898 from the University of Iowa Homeopathic Medical School. And I was going to medical school in Iowa. And I didn't even know there was such a thing in such a history. And I was amazed and I almost didn't buy it, because it was all new to me. But I said, "Oh, I may as well get this." And it says in Latin, it says right across the top, Universitatis Iowensis, and then under that it says Similibus Similius Curanter, right on the diploma. And it was, now I have it sitting in my office, hanging on the wall, and I'm proud of that thing that I found many years ago.
And I must say, America has a rich history of homeopathy. I think one of the oldest schools of homeopathy were there in America. From whatever little I know, I can recall from the history of homeopathy is that it thrived for a very long period of time in USA.
Yep, there's a lot of history here in the US. Most of it has been wiped out from the records. You don't even know about it unless you go digging for it. No one talks about it, but it was here and it was very prominent. There were 22 medical schools, 22 homeopathic medical schools, and hundreds of hospitals and hundreds of practitioners. But then they all eventually converted back to conventional medicine, and the history of homeopathy kind of got squashed out.
So I'm about to go to the next question about the kind of education and schooling that you had in homeopathy. But I have a small question before that. Uh, where do you think is homeopathy currently in the USA in terms of its penetration into the society and its regulation by the government or acceptance by the government?
Well, in terms of physicians, MDs doing homeopathy, there's very few. And it's very hard to get conventional doctors to be interested in homeopathy. In fact, there's probably a lot of resistance to it. But there's a very strong contingent of non-physician homeopaths out there practicing. Um, and there are a number of schools that are, not in medical schools. So it's growing, but it's not growing amongst the medical profession. And it's just there's so much resistance based on, I do think pharma has undermined homeopathy, and but there is some hope now with Robert F. Kennedy being appointed to his position, and I know he's sympathetic to homeopathy. I haven't seen anything that he's done yet specifically for homeopathy, but we're hoping it's coming. We're hoping that they will try to, uh, deregulate homeopathy in the sense that they want to regulate homeopathy like it's pharmaceutical drugs, which would make it very difficult for remedies to exist and very expensive for any new remedies, and it might even eliminate some other remedies. So hopefully, wishing that Kennedy is going to change things for the better, but time will tell. We'll see. Even before Kennedy, we've been treading along. I've been practicing for more than 30 years without any trouble. There are isolated physician homeopaths who practice, and nobody's really ever gotten any trouble. But the feeling is at any moment they could just turn and make it difficult for us. So hopefully that's not going to happen.
I really wish, and I have spoken with European homeopaths, American, Canadian homeopaths, and I really wish that there will be a day that, like how we have homeopathy doctors in India, you would also have the same kind of level of education and the level of penetration that homeopathy deserves, and more than that, people deserve the kind of benefit that homeopathy would give them. I really wish it is regulated in that sense that not just people, but even the government will support it someday.
Yeah, I even had a few chances. They used to invite me to the local medical school, the conventional medical school, to give a brief, hour-long talk on homeopathy. And, most people had no idea what I was talking about. They'd never heard about it before. And the students were somewhat receptive, but over the years I kept doing it. I kept getting more and more skeptical questions, and it seemed like the atmosphere grew less tolerant. But I haven't spoken at the school in recent years, so I don't know what it would be like now.
While you are learning homeopathy formally,
Yes,
uh, how do you think, or let me put it this way, the way in which you are taught homeopathy, the way in which you are taught to think about homeopathic education, about case taking in totality, what of
yes.
that you feel was, that helped you? Was there a pattern to it, or, there was a certain type of teacher, certain type of teaching that helped you?
Yeah, well, certainly the education I got at the medical school with Dr. Hotchner was by far the best, simply because it involved direct contact with patients and real experience and follow-ups and long-term follow-ups. And so that was a lot different than just sitting in a classroom and listening to lectures, which, that's useful too. But and then having him hand it to me and say, "Go ahead, you treat the patients," and that was the best way to do it. There was one point I was at medical school where my confidence was growing in what I was doing, and I had a fellow medical student approach me and say, "Would you be willing to help me?" So I sat down and took his case. It's the first time I took a chronic case on my own without outside of the doctor's office. And I thought about it, and I remember he was this big, tall guy, and he was complaining about losing his confidence and didn't know if he could endure medical school and all the challenges that it brought. So I came down to a choice of between lycopodium and silica, and I gave him silica. And he within weeks he told me, "Holy, I can't believe it. I feel more confident, and I'm not even worried about medical school anymore." And he had me amazed too. That was the first case I ever took outside of the clinic. Uh, but that was the best way to learn, just seeing it, seeing it work. And I remember the first time I sat in the doctor's office, the first patient that I saw, it was the daughter of a faculty member came in, a young girl, and her entire arm had swollen up from a bee sting. And the she had tried everything she could to get it to go down, but it had been swollen for more than a week now. And she tried antihistamines. She actually was prescribed a steroid and nothing. Her arm was just big and swollen, the entire arm, and it wasn't changing. And Dr. Hofner just said, "Here, take a few doses of Apis." And boom, within a couple days, we heard that the arm started to go down and the swelling went away, and everyone was amazed. And that was like the first case I saw. Uh, and then, there are other teachers, like I took classes. I went to the New England School of Homeopathy with Paul Hershkew and Amy Rothenberg. And I had classes with Vasily Gagas and George Vitolkas, the Greek homeopaths, and Sheila Creasy from England, and Jeremy Scher. And they all had interesting perspectives and lots of great stuff to teach. But nothing beats seeing patients right in the clinic and learning with direct experience, because to me, homeopathy is a medicine of experience.
True, true. I agree, and I can reflect back to my own training while you say that without seeing a patient, it is practically very difficult to learn homeopathy. So, going to my next question is that what is the kind of practice that you have been having since many years in New York? What are the kind of patients that you have been seeing? Whether there are common health challenges which you are seeing in the community, whether they have changed over a period of time? If you could just share your experience with us.
Sure. I know there's a very strong contrast between when I was in medical school, that was in Iowa, and the patients that came to see us oftentimes were farmers and people who'd been living very simple lives and working hard and, nothing complicated. And many of those people just needed simple, straightforward constitutional remedies. So we'd give them remedies like calc carb and lycopodium and sulfur and so on. Uh, and then when I moved and set up practice in New York, I saw a whole different type of clientele, and the cases became much more complicated. And not just in New York, but in the US in general, I think people are highly medicalized and they are used to taking lots of drugs and having lots of surgeries and visiting doctors for the slightest of reasons. So the people that come to me are often quite complicated and there's a lot of suppression in the case, and they're taking multiple drugs, and it's always a challenge, and it's always a process of trying to educate them that there is a different way and that you don't need to instantly take a drug when you have a symptom, that there's another way, and we can try and get you healthier in the long run, and to show them that look at the timeline of your condition here, right? You took this and then you took this and then you had this surgery and you took this, and you're not healthier, your health is worse off, right? And so those are a lot of the cases that I have, and a lot of them involve mental emotional pathology too. There's a lot of people with psychiatric conditions and mental emotional issues. But the amazing thing is, it doesn't seem to stop the remedies from working. I often use remedies with people who are taking drugs and they work anyway. It doesn't, it makes it harder to treat in the long run, and you have to get them to slowly taper off their drugs as they show signs of improvement. But it's definitely doable and it works in spite of all that. Uh, so the kind of cases that I like the most are young adults, who are innocent and fresh and open-minded, and the things I have to say to them, you can tell that they're listening and that they're going to absorb it, and they may actually take it to heart, and that the remedy may actually change their life in such a way that it'll keep them healthy going forward. And so I really enjoy treating young adults because you get to make a difference in their lives.
Is there any particular clinical condition that you have encountered more often than other clinical conditions in your practice?
Uh, Not really. I mean, I feel like a lot of people have come in with strange allopathic diagnoses because most people have a mishmash of symptoms that don't fit any single category. So they're often, chronic fatigue or irritable bowel syndrome or just anxiety disorder or something like that. But most of them have an array of problems. And even though they may come in, as you may know, specifically for, doctor, can you treat this? Once you talk to them, you open a whole can of worms and you realize, well, there's way more than just this going on. And so I have to explain to them, I can't just treat your daughter's acne because we also have to take into account the asthma and the allergies and the menstrual irregularities and so on and so forth. So uh, the kinds of things I treat are just mostly chronic, and complicated and drugged and and suppressed and a lot of psychiatric stuff too, I think. So, you know.
So, one, do they understand when you orient them about the kind of therapy they need? And second, do they comply and follow up regularly?
Yeah, I mean, they do. They try at first, and especially, of course, if I get the remedy right, which I don't always do, but when I do, they see and they go, wow, and then they're much more willing to comply. Uh, I certainly think I get a certain percentage of patients who come with expectations, like I'm a doctor, therefore I'm going to give them a pill, and they're going to take that pill every day forever. And when they don't get that, they're almost disappointed. And so I may not see some of those people ever again. So you got to get the remedy right fast if you want to keep them. And but once you do, then you'll see them slowly transform their worldview over time. And each visit, I'll educate them a little bit more about the perspective, and they'll be less inclined to do the same things that they were previously doing. But it's hard work to get those people to rethink because they've been so programmed by such an allopathic culture as the US culture is. It's, there are with the drug commercials, as you may know, right? I think it's the US and New Zealand, right, are the only two countries in the world where drugs are advertised on TV. Well, if you sat down and watched TV, you would be shocked. Like, there are, I'd say, about 50% of all commercials are drug commercials. It's just a tremendous amount of brainwashing going on. So it's a lot of a lot to work against, to have to counteract, to get people to rethink how they see things.
Well, that's shocking. I mean, drug commercials on television, obviously it is going to influence people. Ideally, there should be no drug commercial. I would even say that to that extent, even homeopathic drugs should not be advertised. Because the idea of advertising drugs in any form is counterproductive. I mean, you do that as a service and for the betterment of people. Then the minute you start advertising them, that becomes a difficult zone to deal with.
Sure. And I'm not anti-drug, anti-medicine. I mean, to me, there are definitely situations where people need an allopathic drug or a surgery or a visit to the emergency room or a diagnostic test, and those are all necessary at certain moments. But if people are going to get well in the long run, they need to do something other than take a drug every day or take in the case of we make a joke around here that if you're seeing a person in his 40s, he's taken four drugs. And if you see a person in his 50s, he's taken five drugs. And a person in their 70s are taking seven drugs. And that's almost true. It's just it almost increases with age. And you see these poor people who are taking so many drugs and having so many side effects and interactions, and they don't even realize it. And they're just trying to do what the doctor tells them to do, and they don't know any better. So there's a lot of undoing that we need to do to make the population healthier.
True, true. So, Dr. Larry, what brought you to creating educational videos? I was going through your YouTube channel and you started a concept called your clinic's name is Hudson River Homeopathy. Uh, and your YouTube channel's name is All Things Homeopathy. So, what brought you to getting into educating people online? Not just people, I mean laymen, but also homeopathic doctors since 2018.
Yeah, well, a long time ago, I sat down to write my first book, and then I wrote another book, and I wrote another book, and then I sat back and I realized how much work I'd put in to do that. A lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort. And I looked around and I saw the age of the internet taking over the world. And I realized that people weren't reading books as much as they used to. And I have three very tech savvy sons, all of whom are now software engineers. So they helped me a lot to make my first videos. And I just started it as I was just trying to make some videos to put on YouTube to educate people about just what homeopathy was, period. Just a few videos. That's all I was doing. Here's homeopathy, here's what it is. But then I enjoyed it so much, I kept making videos and I haven't stopped. And, the I think the fun part is I get to I get to write still, like I'm writing a book. I write the scripts, you know, and I get to use graphics to so it's kind of artistic in that sense, you know. Uh, and I get to use technologies that my kids tell me about, and it gets overwhelming sometimes because there's just so much technology and you just can't keep up with it all. Uh, I remember being in high school and I had an appointment with the guidance counselor, and she looked at me and said, "Well, do you know what you want to do for your future?" And I had no idea how to answer that question back then. But then I thought, I had been making my own movies with a movie camera back then, and I said, "Oh, maybe I want to be a filmmaker." So, so I feel like here I am now using my talents, which I think are, I have an ability to write and to be very clear and concise. I think that's my strength. And so I get to combine that with the way I look at it as movie making. And so I get to make little movies all the time, and I actually have a lot of fun doing it. and I haven't grown tired of it yet. So hopefully it'll keep going. And it seems to be attracting attention. So I'm really glad that people are watching them. And I do know that I get a lot of feedback about exactly that. People say they're clear and they're concise and they're helping people to learn, especially the materia medica. Uh, and the interesting thing about it is, when I sit down to write a script, I'll start with whatever. Like right now, I'm working on acne. So I gather up all the information from all different sources, and I just write down key words and phrases on a gigantic list of stuff. Then I take it all and I organize it to put it in order to make sense into different categories. And then I eventually start writing a script out of that outline. But in the process, I learn a whole heck of a lot myself. I learned stuff that, oh, gee, I hadn't read that about that remedy in 10 years. I forgot about that. And so I'm learning while I'm doing it too, which motivates me to keep going because I think it's helping me too to be a better homeopath.
No wonder you have more than 15,000 followers on YouTube. You have more than 500,000 views on your YouTube channel. And I get it that the process that you are following to record those videos is not just point and shoot, but there is hours of work that goes behind preparing for those videos.
Yeah, it's a lot of work between, yeah, gather the information, create the outline, write the script, then record the audio, then apply the graphics to the audio, and you have to time it, right? The timing, I have this really cool program that times the graphics and the text with the audio. It's just, and I got to search for the graphics. That's a challenge. It takes hours to try and find a nice graphic that will express the idea I'm trying to talk about. But when I find that one, it's like, this is a great graphic. And so that's the fun part of it all.
Wonderful, really inspiring and really helpful for everyone out here. Any particular anecdote that you remember from your educational journey, like from the journey of you educating people?
For my educational journey, oh, I just like getting the comments, and I once got a card from Australia telling me that there was a group there of farmers. And they said they get together to watch my videos, and they were thanking me, and that was really nice. They didn't identify themselves, so I couldn't write back to them and thank them. But that was really nice. And but the questions that people ask and the comments they make help me to think more about how to improve the videos. And I think if you look back at from the beginning, the very first videos I made, they're definitely not of the quality that the ones I make now are, because I've just learned more and I'm getting better at it. Not only am I getting better at it, I'm getting more efficient at doing it. So it doesn't take nearly as long as it used to, but it still takes a long time. Um, yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky because the hard part is that people naturally, understandably want to comment about their own health problems and ask me questions about their own health problems. And naturally, I can't do that. I can't just over the internet talk to a complete stranger and suggest to them some remedy or give them advice on their health problem. So it's a challenge to figure out how to handle those people uh, gently and tell them that I can't do that. And that's the hard part of it all. So, but I think people are getting the idea, and I'm getting a little bit less of that lately. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
So, while I was talking to Dr. Larry in the pre-podcast talk, that we are hoping that you will soon come to Instagram, where we have the younger generation of homeopathic doctors and even people who are health enthusiasts nowadays. so that they get to learn much more from you on Instagram, hopefully. I mean, that
All
should
right, I'm going to
happen.
explore that. I'm going to explore that idea.
All right. So we are at the conclusion of our podcast. And what message, Dr. Larry, would you like to give to all of us, people who are health enthusiasts and the homeopathic students and homeopathic practitioners all over the world?
Uh, I think homeopathy is a vast, vast field, and it's very hard to learn all of it at once. It's just not possible. So you have to start with the fundamentals, and you have to build a solid foundation from which then later on you can explore afterwards. So you don't start with the most esoteric teachers and topics. You start with the fundamental classical basics of, of taking a whole case and prescribing one remedy at a time and waiting and reevaluating and all that kind of stuff. And so it's important that people not get the wrong idea. It's again, it's very hard because there's so much information out there on the internet. So you start with the basics, you build on that, then you can go off and experiment, learn about other techniques, slowly debate whether you're going to incorporate that into your practice. Yeah, so another piece of advice is I like to tell people not to follow or believe in the gurus in homeopathy. There are some individuals out there who may fashion themselves as gurus, and those individuals tend to be more dogmatic than maybe some other teachers. And what you don't want to do in homeopathy is become dogmatic. You want to have an open mind to all kinds of perspectives and not just follow the teachings of one individual. Uh, but at the same time, you want to keep to the fundamentals, in my opinion, of classical prescribing while slowly building your knowledge base and learning from all kinds of different folks. So I think that's the kind of advice I would give to people who are learning. And homeopathy is so broad that just about anything you learn can be applied to your practice. If you learn Latin, it helps. If you learn German, it helps. If you study psychology, it helps. If of course, us homeopaths should be students of human nature, and that's the most important part, where you learn about people and what they're like, and you learn how to relate to them. You learn how to relate to a diverse array of people from different walks of life without judging, while being non-judgmental, which is not easy to do for some people, right? So you want to learn about different spiritual perspectives and different cultural perspectives, and the people you come across, you will appreciate them and their unique situations, and how that may help you to understand them and help you to figure out how to treat them homeopathically.
True, true. That actually got me to thinking that I was reading up on your website about knowledge of Native American medicine, probably a topic for another podcast.
Uh-huh.
Because I always feel that whatever is native to the place, whatever herbs or medicine is native to the place, would help the local population most.
Probably so. Right. Correct. You're right. Right.
So, Dr. Larry, last question about the education part for patients is that what kind of education do you think that the laymen who are not homeopaths should know or should be taught about the science of homeopathy so that they can take the best advantage of this art of healing?
You're saying what advice do I have for non-medical people?
No, so what I wanted to ask you is that how do you think should the layman be educated about homeopathy so that
Ah,
they can make the best use of this art of healing?
yes. Yeah, it's a challenge too, because at least in the United States, people love their drugs, right? So when they realize they can buy a remedy kit, they get trigger happy and they start popping remedies. This one and that one and this one and that one, and for every little symptom, and there's a challenge in educating them about that too, because the ideal is that if a person is healthy, they're going to get some cold symptoms or a minor headache, and they're not going to do anything about it, and they're going to let it go, or they're going to lay down and take a rest until their headache's better, right? Instead of popping pills, and by popping homeopathic pills, homeopathic remedies, you're not going to help yourself either. And um, I make it a rule in my practice. When I see someone, I tell them from the start, I don't want you to be self-prescribing because you're going to undermine my treatment for you, and we can't have that. Um, but you can't stop people from doing what they want to do. On the other hand, there's a useful way to use homeopathy at home for common acute things like a big bruise or a sprained ankle or something like that, and that's perfectly reasonable, and people can use the remedies at home for situations like that. But it's such a big task to teach. People don't even know what homeopathy is to begin with, right? And then you have to teach, okay, this is what constitutional prescribing is or chronic prescribing, and now this is first aid prescribing, and this is first aid at home prescribing. And so I just think it's going to take a lot of time for the world to wake up, the United States to wake up to the proper use of homeopathy. So it's a challenge.
And I am quite certain that with the right kind of spirit that you have exhibited in teaching people about homeopathy, in writing books on homeopathy so that it reaches to the masses, I'm sure that change is going to come soon.
I hope so. You may be more optimistic than me. I know in India it's a lot more popular. So a lot more people know about it. In the US, it's hard work, but in time, we see it changing with the new administration and their openness to alternatives in medicine, and so that's a good start.
True, true. Dr. Larry, really, I'm grateful for you to share such a wealth of experience from not just your practice, but from your life and learnings from homeopathy. And if someone wants to reach Dr. Larry, I'm going to leave the links to his website, to his books in the description section and his YouTube channel, because trust me, these are very, very good videos uh, for you to watch. And so, Dr. Larry, we are hoping that maybe someday you will start some kind of probably courses or some sort of educational stuff for homeopathic doctors as well.
Well, thanks, Kier, for having me. This was a fun conversation.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching this podcast. Do share this with everyone if you found it useful, if you found it enriching. Thank you once again all, and thank you, Dr. Larry, for being part of the podcast.